what are some real life scenarios that we can all go like, oh, that's an area where we might need boundaries?
What happens most times, we don't even think in those terms. Then we feel overwhelmed.
Even for me personally, it's hard to discern what's a good thing and what's the best thing.
How can we possibly know what to choose, what wins?
What am I afraid of losing that's got my schedule so overbooked right now?
I hope people just find a little bit more freedom than what they have today.
I think this is something that I could use in my own life. Have you ever felt burned out, overwhelmed? Maybe you feel undervalued and maybe unappreciated. You know, the secret to a lot of these feelings is a lack of boundaries. And the answer is rediscovering boundaries in our lives. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going to give you 4 really clear steps that you can do to institute and put in place boundaries in your life. Now, it doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter if it's boundaries in work or in like I expect to go to a Barnes and Noble and see a whole shelf being like, that's our boundaries section.
There probably is a boundary shelf. It's probably true. That's probably a real thing.
Yeah, it's probably right next to like keto diets.
Yes.
So like I'm just kind of curious, could we define it for our purposes what personal boundaries are? And let's try to expunge the self-helpy stuff out of it. So
Yeah, so I think around guardrails, things to make great decisions, just around what you let into your life, what you don't let into your life, and just, some of the filters around whether, again, it's your in-laws, your work, your school, your kids, all that stuff.
what I like about what you said there is guardrails. See, guardrails is to protect what you love. Guardrails aren't fences to keep bad stuff out. It's to protect what you care about. And I like that.
Yeah, it's to keep you from going off the road into the ditch.
Yeah.
Been there. I think of a couple things. I think of decisions that you make. So, Joanna, I think you're definitely onto something with that. In other words, we're in control of our lives, and we tend to think about our schedule or our finances or our work schedule and all that as if we don't have any agency over it. So I like that you brought up it's decisions that we make. I also think it's structures that we put in place. So boundaries, if I were to sit down with someone and they're like, what is a boundary? This is how I'd probably say it. It's decisions you make and structures you put in your life to create margin. That's the bottom line, to create margin. And what is margin? Margin is the gap between the load we're carrying and the limits we have.
Oh.
That's margin. And so when the load you're carrying is right up against the limits of your life, you have no margin. The only way to create margin is you've got to set some boundaries. So,
Wow.
well, I'm sure we'll dive into all that, but that would be conceptually how I would think about boundaries.
I think I I don't know if I should be hosting this episode or just listening to this episode because I think this is something that I could use in my own life. And I think everyone can probably agree, but maybe if there's listeners out there that they're not totally sure this applies to them, what are some scenarios that we might need boundaries in? So what are some real life scenarios that we can all go like, oh, that's an area where we might need boundaries in?
Money.
Oh.
So let's just go back to the definition, personal finances. So we all have limits. What is our limits? How much money we make. So, I mean, like this is probably the easiest, most practical sort of way of thinking about it. I make $10, let's just say.
Yeah.
That's my limit. My load that I'm carrying, if I spend $9.99, I've got 1 penny of margin. I will feel stressed if something comes up that I wasn't expecting, right? If I make decisions to create boundaries and go, I won't spend more than 60% of what I make or 70% of what I make, whatever. Now I have more margin. So finances is one, relationships is one, emotional we all have emotional limits, emotional capacity. So it's basically any area in your life that you have limits, physical limit. We have physical limits, we have emotional limits, we have relationship limits, we have schedule limits, we have a limited amount of time in a day, and we have financial limits. Those would be some key areas I would think of.
Yeah, I think like the time piece is huge. It's funny, I had someone say to me once, even with more time in a day, if you didn't have great boundaries around how to use it, you still would use it
Wouldn't
poorly.
matter. Yep.
And so, yeah, I think time and schedule is like a huge one, and how then that plays with work and home. It is interesting how often we know exactly how our work schedule is planned, but we don't necessarily think about that in the same context in our home
Mm.
schedule. And then, yeah, like then you feel like you're bumping up against this thing or that thing. So yeah, I think time is actually a huge one, especially, yeah, the more people then you add to your family, it doesn't get any
Mhm.
easier.
And I think it's ultimately about happening to your life instead of your life happening to you.
Hmm.
Boundaries is a way of you getting to be the conductor,
Yes.
the captain of your life, and saying like, no, I'm not going to just float, like you said, like a piece of paper on the wind kind of thing, but it's like I'm going to actually make a decision and go towards it.
Yes.
And like so and other things too is like I was thinking about this, like, even like things like sexual boundaries, like,
Mhm.
for young people that are in dating relationships, or other material boundaries, like, like giving up of your space, your property. Like,
Mhm.
there's just so many things in life that are just, we need to decide. If we don't decide, life just tends to decide for us.
Yeah, it'll creep in on you.
And I think it's just really important that we put boundaries in place. So,
Because like fundamentally because margin is where things thrive. Just in general. Margin is where we have more peace. Margin is where relationships have time to breathe. Margin is where we come home, we sleep well at night. Margin is where we have energy left over at the end of the day for our kids. Margin is so it margin is where we can take on a car issue with the car and it not put us over the edge financially. It's all in the margin that peace exists. And so without boundaries, without ever considering what the kind of margin you want to live with, it will all creep in on you and you will live marginless living and you will be it'll be more stressful.
I have this visual picture of like a really crowded woods. And it's like the more crowded it is, the less light gets in and the less things grow.
Mm.
And it's almost like
The
margin in
less
our
what?
life. Things grow.
Oh, lichen.
No, light.
Oh, light gets in. I thought it was like a moss or something that you was like, oh man, you know your biology, man.
Yeah, I've been a botanist
You
and
were
you didn't
you
realize
were
it.
a
All
forestry
this
major.
time, you thought I was pastoring. I'm just botany, all day long botany. No, but like, this crowded forest, light doesn't get in
Yeah.
and things don't grow. And it's almost like the same thing is like that margin, what you were describing is
Oh yeah.
things grow in the margin.
Yeah.
That's where the sunlight gets in. That's where things can
Yes.
grow, spiritual things and habits and health
Yeah.
and community and
I
a
like
lot of
that image.
things.
Yeah, the canopy. You're opening up space in the canopy
Yeah, so that
for
light
light
can
to
get
get
in
in.
and new things can grow in your life, and especially even some peace. Maybe it just needs to stay
Mhm.
open, and that's
Well, I
okay.
talk to people all the time, here at the church, and they'll tell me about how stressed they are, and then you'll talk to them. It's like, well, I got this going on, got this going on, got this going on, got this going on. I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm caring for this, I'm carrying this, and it's like, well, what are you going to let go? Well, I can't let go any of it. It's like, well, all right, well then, oh, this is the life you're choosing.
And in that situation, things that you never intended to die die. And that's so like let's talk about what prevents people from doing this. Like if this was easy, everyone we wouldn't be talking about this. If
Mm.
this wasn't a problem, we'd move on to the next topic on the podcast. But I know I feel this in my life and I don't have this figured out yet. So what prevents people from exercising personal boundaries and why are they so difficult to accomplish in families and in relationships and in personal life and everything?
I think part of it is, I mean, even for me personally, I think sometimes it's hard to discern what's a good thing and what's the best thing. So I would say, even like for our home life and work life and family life, um, we do a lot. And I don't know, like any of you parents out there who are still recognizing that we're in a back to school season, because I feel like every year it just feels like it takes us so long to click into that rhythm. Um, there's a lot of options to choose from, and most of them are still really good things. And so, whether that's getting involved in sports with your kids, whether that's volunteering at your school, whether that's joining like your PTO or just different things like that, um, those are all good things. And so, sometimes I think it is just hard. And I can say for me, sometimes it's hard for me to even discern, hey, this is a lot of good stuff. Is this the best stuff? a lot of good stuff also can eat at the margin, where if we can just choose the best stuff, we're still making an impact in the ways that we want to be involved or, support our family and our school, but not do all the things. So, yeah, I think sometimes it's just discernment around good versus best, because even inherently, most things that we're choosing aren't bad things. It can just be appealing to want to do a lot of good things.
I love that analogy of good versus best because I think if we don't prune life, things that a lot of good is going to go away. We'll never get best. And in actuality, some of the very good, you get burned out.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, you could have been good for these 3 things, but because you tried to do these 6 things,
Yeah.
now you're good for no things.
Yep. Yeah.
But the question still remains, what's the thing behind the thing? That's what leads to it. What's the internal drive that would even lead us to those
Mhm.
things? And as the thing I wrote down was just fear of loss, and kind of
Yeah.
working this out as I'm talking here. So, but I do wonder if a fear of loss at the end of the day is kind of fundamentally behind why we don't set boundaries. Now that can look at 1,000 different ways. So it's a fear of loss of a material thing that we think we deserve or that we're not going to get. If we don't buy it now, we're not going to have it. So it's a fear of loss of that.
Okay.
It's a fear of loss of an opportunity. And so we pack our schedules and we live up against our limits. We don't create boundaries. It's a fear of loss of a relationship. And so we take on all the crud that we shouldn't be taking on from someone else because we're afraid of losing the relationship. So we've convinced ourselves, I think a lot of times, that the fear of loss is real. And so we don't want to go through that pain. And so we live the fear of loss of our kids falling behind. So we've got them in every single thing. But now we're the ones paying the margin cost of it.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if some of that's behind it. And I think so much of the scriptures talks about contentment and us being willing and able to trust God with what we've been given, not necessarily like to let go of the fears of what we don't have. I think about David in the Psalms. This is the day that the Lord has made. Not tomorrow, that's coming, but this, like, can we be content with this day right now? I think about the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20, right? And at the end of it, it's like, do not covet. What a fascinating, if you had 10 rules, think about this. If you had 10 rules to give someone and be like, this is it, would don't want what other people have make the list for you? I mean, it's an interesting kind of thing. And yet that's the one that's unpacked, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, that's almost unpacked the most. Because if you get that one, that will drive all the others. And anyways, so it's interesting, even when Jesus talks about in Matthew chapter 6, do not worry, tomorrow will have enough worries of its own, whatever. He draws it back to contentment. He's like, look at the birds of the air. They're not worried about anything, and yet they're being given what they need. Look at the flowers. They're not worried about anything, and yet and he says, don't you think God loves you more than the sparrows? So much of it goes back to, if I don't, it won't happen. If I don't do this for my kids, if I don't do this for myself, if I don't whatever, if I don't take on this problem that's theirs, it's not going to happen. And so we just take so much on, and then have to live with those repercussions.
I think I think that is like literally probably 50% of all boundaries and lack of boundaries is that. I think there's one other, and I think it has a lot to do with self-esteem and fear of conflict.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't have boundaries because although they might intellectually know everything you said is true,
Yeah.
they are deathly afraid of putting boundaries in their life for fear of upsetting others.
Definitely.
Like, they don't want to ruffle feathers. They don't want to say no to the family vacation because they're afraid
Yep.
that, everyone's going to be mad at them.
Yep.
Or they don't want to say no to the project at the school because they're afraid that
Don't want to let someone down.
they're going to let someone down.
Yeah.
And then I think it ties into self-esteem because it makes them feel important. And I've known some people that have like no boundaries, no margin, no sunlight's getting in. And I think they like it. I think they like it even though I see them eating away at them because they're like, I'm important.
What I see a lot, Chad, too, is people doing those things. And what I've done is stepped in and doing those things and then being resentful about it. Yeah, I see that a ton. And I've done that. I've been there where, because I'm like, it's like when you start rolling your eyes, like, fine. And you don't really want to. You know you need a boundary. You know you need to say no because your margin is too tight. And yet you roll your eyes and do it, and it's like, then all the joy's out of it anyways. So you go to the family vacation and you're rolling your eyes about it because you know your family just needed some time together, and now you've got to give it up or whatever. So I'm not saying those things are easy. There's a lot of dynamics to that kind of stuff. And you might have a family like that or other people that shame you because of that. And when you make boundaries for your life, most people don't like that. And they will probably shame you over some of those things and tell you bad things about yourself and yada yada. So
Yeah, I feel like we've even had that happen as a family more so just again, like as our family has grown. And so like it was even different when it was just Kevin and I, then it was different when we added like our children. And what's interesting is I think a lot of times we've found that we have to get honest with Kevin and I first and make sure that we're tracking. And then how are we going to basically be a unified team to share that with someone else? So whether it's like a family thing or whether it's even a decision we're making, that affects our family, that's actually been a really hard lesson for us to learn because then, I don't know, like, when individually, when your boundaries are out of whack, then that makes things out of whack. Then when your like team or like your family boundaries are out of whack, then that puts you and your partner in like this cycle of talking about it or arguing about it. And so I think that's been another thing that we've noticed is like when one of us is feeling that, there are times where we've just tried to resolve that on our own and it's like not gone well. For fear of like uh letting the other person down, even in that. And so anyway, I think that too, like being able to be honest with your spouse or your family around it too. And then how are you guys unified as a unit to talk about that kind of stuff, I think can help also. Cause like the family of origin stuff is just so interesting because yeah, like you came from that family, you don't want to let them down. But yeah, like how do you talk about that in a healthy way?
I think this leads us into another question that I'm really like excited to ask is like actual examples. And so an example I have that you just brought up to me is this. Steph and I do premarital mentoring. So we premarital, like before couples get married, they meet with Steph and I for a couple weeks, and we just kind of talk about like, hey, marriage. Steph and I have been married for 20 years, and we kind of give them like, hey, don't do this, do this.
so important to do. If you're listening to this and you're engaged or you're thinking about getting engaged, you got to get into premarital mentoring. It's like no one would start driving a car before they've sat in the driver's seat and tried to at least go, okay, where's the steering wheel? Where's it? So premarital mentoring doesn't get rid of all the conflict, but it can at least bring up, okay, here's the steering wheel. Here's the issues, here's the gas pedal. Here's the things y'all need to talk about. So anyways, sidebar on that, but.
And LCBC has great premarital mentoring.
Yes.
Because
talk to our church. If you're somewhere else right now, go to another church, find it.
In the show notes, we'll link to some information about that. But one of the things we talk about that couples just are always surprised that we talk about, and we talk about it for a while, and it's boundaries. And we talk about you're going to have boundary issues with your parents.
Yeah.
And they're like, "What? Well," and we're gonna be like, "Do you ever think about where you're gonna be on Christmas morning? And what happens when you have a baby?" And so we have couples come back to us and go like, we had to have a conversation because mom and dad were stopping by unannounced, just opening the door, and we've been married for 6 months. And it's like,
not the right time to open the door.
Yeah. And it's like boundaries.
Yeah.
You need boundaries. And I think that's an example of, so in-laws and family members that are well-intended. It's like Joanna was saying, your heart is for them, you love them, but boundaries is the best thing for your relationship so you don't resent them. Mm-hmm. So what are some more examples of some places where people might need boundaries? What about work? Like, do you see like workaholics? I think it is another one where people like they don't make time for anything else but work because it's good and they do it for their family, but it's also self-esteem related. I think that's another one. I just think there's a lot of those out there.
Yeah, I'm trying to put it into words, but almost like that achieving or like areas of performance. And so it is even interesting. as we've gotten deeper into like the sports world with Finn, it's like, well, this year there's more practices than ever than there were last year. And even Finn is like wanting to, Dad, can we get to the field and practice again tonight? Like, I really want to do this thing really well. And so anyway, so they've like been working on pitching. But like, I think it's even things like that, that it's like, because you just want to be so good at the thing, you just like start, just like hyper fixating even on the thing, that then like boundaries kind of also, whatever boundaries you did have in place around it, they can kind of move over because you want to do the thing really well.
I love that. I actually have some friends that their son was into archery, and he actually was really good. Like I didn't actually know that archery was still a thing, but apparently it's quite a thriving sport. And his archery coaches and stuff were like, no, this kid could like go to Vegas. Like this kid is like really, really good.
I had
And,
no
like, put on
idea
a
he'd
show?
go-
Like
yeah.
no, apparently that's where archery
that's the Mecca.
competitions are. Is
Oh.
like, you know,
Interesting. I thought you were talking about like he's with the tiger magicians and he's like, you know what I mean?
behind this it's a white tiger.
Right. And he's just shooting it with a bow. Okay, so not a show.
not a show,
competition.
but
Gotcha.
now that's in my head for free. No, he
Penn and
could
Teller.
go to the competitions and stuff, and they were like, but what he needs to do is continue. Like he needs to do more. He needs to do more practices, more tournaments, more. And they were like, oh, they were like, no. That was surprising to everyone involved because it was like, why isn't this best? And they were like, no, family game night is best.
Well, see what they're doing there is, families have to make, you have to make a decision, even at a personal level. It doesn't have to be a family unit. At a personal level, there was a concept a pastor put out there years ago called choosing to cheat. And it's the whole idea that every day we're cheating something. We like from so in that, take that example. They made a decision that they were going to not cheat game night in order for the activity of the son. Now, some families may make a different. You just got to know what you're choosing to cheat. So
Yeah.
some families that might be, no, we're willing. We're going to create margin on the other side in order to help our kid right now pursue this archery dream of theirs. That's
Totally.
fine. You just got to know. It's just more. What happens most times, we don't even think about. We don't think in those terms. And so what's happened? Then we feel overwhelmed because we haven't thought. We never tried to. We didn't give up anything to pursue another thing. That's the issue. And so whatever your decision is, just realize you are going to cheat something and just be intentional about what you're cheating. That's all. Make that actual decision, intentional strategic decision. If you don't, it's going to catch up with you because you are, again, implicitly cheating something. You have to. And we only have, remember, limits. We only have this many
I
hours.
tell that story. I tell that story not to shame any parent, like, and this family might decide a year from now that they're going to go do that.
Right.
And that's fine. That's fine. But I like that they didn't just, coach said, so we did.
We have to. Yeah.
They
thought
were like,
about it.
They were like, no.
They were like, we're in control of it. And they made that decision.
Yes.
Yeah,
And it was their life's decision.
Yeah.
Now they might make a different decision later.
Sure.
But for right now.
But they'll make it intentionally.
Yes.
Knowing what they're giving on the other side. You're just always trading. You're always cheating something.
But what if you don't? So that's my next question is like, what if you don't? Like, what if there's someone listening out there that's like, that's all well and good. And there's a lot of people that are going to be like, I just can't, guys. I'm sorry. I can't.
You just can't what?
I can't make boundaries. Like my life, I have no margin. I'll never have margin. Maybe they aren't really wanting to do the personal, reflection of what they have in their life right now. So is there dangers? Like, so what would you caution people that are saying like, sorry, boundaries are just not for me and my family right now? So.
Yeah, I would say to them, you're not going to be able to do that forever. So like you might feel like you can do it right now, but there will likely come a day, whether you actually realize it or not, or can see it coming or not, that you're just going to max out. And so it's interesting, even for me personally, it's funny when Chad and I were talking about this episode, I was like, Chad, I don't know if I'm good at boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, that's perfect. And so I think even for me, like this is something very much in me that I have to, either one, like Kevin has permission to say, hey, I see these things in you. It's about to happen and you don't know it. because he's seen when I've reached or maxed at the limits, and like it doesn't go well. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would just say to that person, like, you might feel like it's fine or you don't need them today. There will come a day where it's going to feel like you got hit by a truck. Um, and then it's like you have to then figure out how to rebuild or bounce back from that.
Yep.
And that's so much more painful than figuring out how to keep it in check along the way. Again, doesn't mean it's going to be even Steven the whole time. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be blips
Totally.
that feel harder than others. But like total burnout is very difficult to build back from.
It is impossible to avoid if you live
Yeah.
at that. If you live beyond your limits for an extended period of time, it will. You do not have a choice. This is a law. This is God's law of nature in some ways that will come to be affected in some way, shape, or form. What I would tell that person is, I love you. Come back and talk to me when you hit the. You can't drive a car in RPMs in the red for an extended amount of time before the engine blows. And so I just don't want it to be a heart attack that finally gets your attention, that you have physical boundaries are good in your diet and your exercise and all that. Those are margin physically is good. I don't want it to be you lost your relationship with your kid before you realize, oh man, you never created boundaries to give in your schedule for the. So my point is, it'll catch up with you. And that's just it's a reality of life.
It that's amazing. The same word picture was coming to my head, that going into the red,
Mm-hmm.
and the engine will blow, and the engine blow might be, a divorce. It might be a nervous breakdown. It might be, a heart attack. It could be resentment within your family. It could be like, I don't talk to my, my sister anymore. It could be an affair. It could be because when you're in the red, eventually the engine blows and you do irrational things.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And it's
We
so
weren't made to live that way. That's the bottom line. I find it fascinating that God is so committed to margin in our life. You see this actually multiple places throughout the scriptures. But one of the places that I think is most interesting is in Genesis. God creates, and then on the seventh day takes a rest. He creates margin for himself, which is weird, right? Just kind of an idea. And obviously God doesn't need rest. It's to set the stage for something he wants us to understand about his nature and about who we are. And then in Exodus, again, the people have been enslaved. They've had no margin for 400 years, the Israelites, the Hebrew people. They come out of that, and one of the very first things God commands is to take a break. Why? Because he's trying to teach them how to be human again. They've only known how to be slaves. And he needs to take them into the wilderness to teach them how to be people again, not slaves. And one of the first fundamental things he tells them, this is how a human, not a machine, lives, is you take a break. He builds in margin to their schedule and enforces it. So my point is, you can fight this all you want, but Paul said, where did he say this? In Galatians, Paul said, God cannot be mocked. His truth, the way things work in this world, you can bucket all of it. It doesn't really matter. And then he goes on to use agriculture. He says, whatever seed is thrown, that is what will grow. You'll reap the harvest of the seed that you sow. And he's saying that's a fundamental truth of life, that if you don't follow God along some of these paths, you will burn out. It's like if I plant an apple seed, you will get an apple tree. You're not changing that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Last year I read a book. It's called The Deeply Formed Life by Rich Villodas. And one of the things he talks about in the context of work and boundaries is that even in creation, we were created like basically on the last day, and then the seventh day was rest. And so even humans came into the scene not having to earn rest. And so I think sometimes also we feel like, and me, even just the way I'm wired, sometimes I feel like I have to do all the work to earn the
Yes.
rest.
That's so true.
And God was not asking me to earn rest. Yes, he was asking me to like do the work,
Yep.
to like
Co-create with him.
right,
in this world,
exactly.
Steward.
But
Yep.
he wasn't telling me that I need to do the work in order to earn the rest. And so like Jason, I even remember a while back, you had even shared with our staff, like, don't go into vacation to feel like you had to earn the rest. Like, how much better would it be if we could actually go into vacation and just enjoy it and
Yeah.
not feel like that's the moment that like we're going to burn ourselves out, get us to that moment, and then use vacation to like, quote,
Recoup.
recover.
Yeah.
Right. Instead, what if we just got to enjoy it because we didn't, um, earn it? So anyway, not that we shouldn't be working hard, but I think there's like a weird thing that happens when you feel like you can't rest until you've earned it, that then I think that that also contributes to like how
I
you
love
bump
that.
up against the boundary line.
Well, and 6 days off for a vacation can't make up for 31 weeks in the red.
Yeah, totally.
I can't burn my engine in
Mhm.
RPMs and then take it into my mechanic and be like, "You guys fix it. You have an hour. Like, go ahead and fix this." He's like, "The thing's burned."
Mhm.
So if you're waiting to if you think that's going to make up for it just doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way.
So if that wasn't enough to compel us to get to our next section, the actual 4 things people can do, I don't know what will. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our first step, which is to talk to God. We actually say ask God. So how does talking to God incorporate? It seems counterintuitive. It seems like the first step should be like get our calendars out. It seems like our first step should be, evaluate everything, write everything on a legal notepad. But our first step here is to talk to God. So how important is it to prioritize talking to God and putting God at the center of this?
Because I feel like these things are driven all of our beliefs, actions, and behaviors come from our heart. They come from things we fundamentally believe about ourselves. And what Jesus says, I mean, he even says that at one point. He says that murderous thoughts or, all the adulterous thoughts, all these kinds of things, like things that end up acting themselves out, he says, come from the heart. So that's the genesis of it all. The reason you talk to God is because God alone is able to search our hearts and reveal to us, God, it's not about just changing my schedule. I want to know what I'm afraid of losing because that's the part I need healed. That's the part I need freedom in. God, the fact that I don't want to let my sister down. And so I keep taking on all of her crap. God, heal that in me, the thing that needs to be needed. Like, if I can get that healed, then I can draw somebody. So it's almost like that's the deeper work. And that's the work that only God can do. And if you're real courageous, just ask God, say, God, what am I afraid of losing that's got my schedule so overbooked right now? What is it? And I mean, sit there and listen. What is it you're afraid of losing? I'm afraid of losing status with my, okay, God, what do you have to say about that fear? And let his truth speak into those kinds of things. So so again, I want to go one level below even some of those things. It's not, I mean, like there's all sorts of hacks you can learn with drawing boundaries in your schedule.
Yeah.
If you haven't got the fear of loss healed, whatever you think, like you said this, I think kind of alluded this earlier, Joanna, like you're going to end up, it's just going to be something else
Mm.
that replaces it.
Yeah. Yeah. Even you sharing that just makes me think like it's also a reminder of like who you serve. So if you have decided to give your life to Christ and decided that you are serving Jesus and his plan for you, then that also makes it a lot easier to have any other conversations that have to come after this. So whether it is with your sister, whether it is with the thing at the school or whatever the thing is, knowing that you're serving Jesus first and the plan he has for your life, you're not serving, the other fill in the blank thing. And so I think just starting from that posture in recognition of like, hey, God, yeah, you're right. You know what? I'm serving you. I want to build my life around the plans you have for my life. It makes it a lot. Again, those people still might not understand, but you are confident in where you're making the decisions and why.
I shared a story with the church this recently about uh, earlier in my life, and my daughter was real young, and I won't go into the whole thing, but essentially ignoring her um, when she wanted my attention at one point. It was like a very specific memory one day when she wanted my attention for something, and I just completely ignored her because I was responding to an email. All right, it's a scenario we can probably all imagine in some way, shape, or form where we ignore the people closest to us in pursuit of something else. Now, my point in bringing that up is, see, it was my insecurities at work there. It was if I don't respond, if I don't defend myself, see, that's what I'm afraid of losing. And if you can heal those things and ask God, why did I feel the need to ignore my own daughter, to respond to an email? And it was a real nasty email, but like I felt anger and I felt, what is that thing? Because that's what drove the behavior. You know what I mean? It was, if I don't defend myself, no one will. All right, well, God's like, let's talk about that, because that's where the lack of trust comes. That's where I'm not trusting God to defend me. I'm not trusting God to take care of this. I'm not trusting God. And that's what, again, Jesus keeps driving back to in Matthew 6. He's like, don't you think you have a heavenly Father who cares for you more? Like, if you let that email go and you pay attention to your daughter, don't you trust that God will take care of that?
Yeah.
And the answer is, in that moment, no, I don't. So I'll take care of it. That's cool. God, I think Jesus is so gracious. He's like, cool, go for it. Watch where this leads.
Wow.
And where it leads is a little girl who's dejected because her dad. And Jesus at that point gently just nudged and said, you think that's a better way of living? No. All right. And let's draw some boundaries.
I love that.
Leave your laptop at home.
Boy, that's every time I've heard you tell that story like 2 or 3 times, and every time you tell it, I'm like, and what I'm feeling is, and I want everyone to understand, don't feel guilt. Don't feel shame. We're going to talk about that in upcoming episodes. Feel compelled.
Opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Wherever you are. It doesn't matter if your daughter is still 2 or 22.
Totally.
It's like, don't beat yourself up, because that's not of God. God is not beating you up today with this message.
Mm-mm.
He's compelling you to think about it differently. And that's what I think ask God, our first step, ask God does, is it's God, help me with this because I can't do it. If you could do it on your own, you would have already done it.
Mm.
So like if you could do this on your own without God, we wouldn't be having this conversation, but clearly we can't. So let's talk about step 2. So step 1 is ask God. Step 2 is be flexible. And this is the idea that you can't have new boundaries, and you can't say that I'm going to have new health and rhythm and sudden margin in my life, but I'm going to keep everything the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it sounds like, that's silly. That's what most of us do. They go like, I'm going to have margin.
Yeah.
And it just means I'm going to stay up later and not sleep as much, because that's where I'll get the margin. You know what I mean? But I'm going to keep everything the same. He's still going to be in soccer. He's still going to do this, and they're going to do this, and she's going to be at the school for this, and nothing changes, but they think they're getting margin, and they're just going to keep pushing for that vacation.
Well, yeah, setting boundaries in order to create margin requires you reducing the load you're carrying. I mean, well, you can gain margin in life one of 2 ways. You can increase your limit, the amount you can carry, or you can lower the load. Right? We're just way more in control of the load that we're carrying. So our hours in a day are fixed. You literally can't create more. So what are we in control of? We're in control of the schedule. That's the load we carry. So that's where the assumption there is, if you want to create more margin, you will have to make changes to the way that you're scheduling yourself. Money, maybe a little bit different. You could go out and earn more income. So you can increase the limit on that one, but you will still at some point hit a fixed limit. So the way that you will have to make, if you need margin and you need to create the boundaries are going to come by lowering the load that you're carrying, right? So with every area, emotions, all that, right? Any area that we feel like we're maxed out, that our load is either at or exceeding our limits, you will have to make choices to lower the load. Does that make sense? To lessen it.
Yeah, and I think too, figuring out how much is possible at what times. And so even with you saying like be flexible, even things or levers. So I don't know, I kind of think through it as like there's just a bunch of levers to start like now pressing on, right? So like we've decided, hey, maybe it's we're recognizing we feel up against the wall for not getting enough family time. And like that's the thing that we feel like our margin is so pinched that family time is the thing that we want to try to carve back.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think then you look at all of the places that you're spending your time, your energy, or things that are taking time and energy away from you, or, you know, even from a financial perspective, and you start just pulling levers. So like I think there's probably two ways to think through where you could just obliterate the whole thing and start over. But for most people, that's just not possible. So then what are the small levers or choices that you can just start pulling? And so I think when you start evaluating, being flexible in like, you might pull one lever and it just doesn't quite work right. So then cool, like let's go to another lever. The thing that I like about starting the conversation and being flexible is for no one person or one family is this going to be a one size fits all. And so I think just being flexible is awesome because you're working from an intentional place. Anytime you choose to start from an intentional place, good should follow that, right? And so anyway, just in the realm of being flexible, I think what is the low hanging fruit and what are the small levers to start pulling to then see what happens as a result of that. And then give yourself a whole ton of grace, like as you're figuring it out. And so I would even say for us and our family, from season to season, we try to evaluate and be flexible because no two seasons look alike in just even the life stage of a year. And so, anyway, with being flexible, I think like you just have to start small and look for the little wins. And little wins over time, I think, create more margin and get you closer to where you feel like God is calling you or your family, kind of in this area.
I I I love that. Being flexible is just simply a fact of it's choosing it's choosing what needs to change. It's looking at everything and choosing what needs to change. Now the anecdote or the solution may look a lot of different ways, but sometimes just being flexible is saying this is what needs to change. This is what God has revealed to me by asking him needs to change. Let's figure out a way to change it, and that could look a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
So, step 1 is asking God, step 2 is being flexible, but step 3 is choosing what wins.
Mhm.
Choosing what wins, not what loses, but what wins. And I think this was a good segue into that is how do we choose what wins? How does a because this goes back to what Joanna said, and I think this is really a difficult thing for a lot of people is everything's good. Everything's good. Family time's good, and extended family time's good, and working at the church is good, and volunteering at the school is good, and it's all good. How can we possibly know what to choose, what wins?
Well, and two, actually, even with what everything is good, I think we also just need to acknowledge that sometimes everything might be necessary too. And so I know we're listening to, or we have listeners that are in a bunch of different scenarios. And so I also know that you might be listening to this thinking, like, hey, I'm the one that is working this weird shift to put food on the table for my kids. I'm the one that, like, yeah, you're right. You know what? I do miss bedtime because, again, I work that weird job with the weird hours to put food on the table for my kids. And so I also just want to acknowledge, like, there might be circumstantial things that are
Mhm.
also
Yes.
happening that while those things also might be good, you might find yourself in a scenario where some of these things are necessary. Um, and it might not be able to like, like obliterate, rebuild, start over. And so anyway, I just think like quick little
I
sidebar on
love
that.
that.
I think
So,
single parents, that's a
Yeah.
huge one. I
yeah,
mean, all of
so
our friends that are single parents, the load that they carry is significant. It's significant, and so many of them feel like they're constantly pushing up against the limits. I just don't want to let anybody off the hook because the reality is there's people. I mean, like when I say let off the hook, I mean in doing the work of evaluating, going where am I living marginless though that I haven't created some boundaries. And I guarantee with every single person, single parent, parents, single person, college student, doesn't matter. We tend to live at our limits. And there is always places, might be small, but there's spaces to create, gain back some margin emotionally,
Yep.
physically.
And I think to recognize there are sometimes we have margin that we don't recognize as margin either. And so, like, practically speaking, like, I don't know, let's say it's like, again, that quality time piece. So maybe you're listening and you're challenged by getting quality time with your kids. So, what are pockets that you're around your kids that you're not using the margin that we also do have? And so, I think, I could think about even drive time. Like right
Mhm.
now, we're doing a lot of driving to get everyone where they need to be. So, it's like, great. Then, how are we recognizing that? And then, even being intentional with that car time to carve out like the let's have some intentional conversation or like also let's not make sure we're uh wasting the margin that we don't even know that we have as margin. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Well, yes, and the thing is, when we're in the red all the time, when we're constantly, we will take any margin we have and we'll numb. We'll usually numb
Right.
ourselves out.
Yep.
In turn, creating that sort of that self fulfilling prophecy of you're numbed out. You had some margin. Now we're talking schedule again.
Yep.
But you had some margin, and then all of a sudden it's kind of wasted.
Yep.
I know that's where. I mean, I definitely have been there.
Totally. And then you go right back to striving.
Yeah.
And then you get into this weird, like, where you're still thirsty, even though you think you just
Yeah,
rested, but
yeah.
you didn't really.
Yeah.
Seems to make sense that if you're a single parent, you probably have already grown accustomed to creating margin with budget because like there might be a limited amount of budget and you go like we can't go on that vacation because we have a limited budget. But a lot of times we got to talk to God about our feelings of like I want to give my kids everything because I'm trying to compensate
Yeah. No,
for
that's true.
what
Yeah.
they've lost. So I want to give them everything and I want them to have the sneakers and I want them to go on that school trip and I want them to have everything. But in the same way, I would encourage all of us, let yourself off the hook. I would just say, let yourself off the hook and know that in the same way that, your kids are going to get used to the fact that they may not have as much money as the kid down the road. Also probably the family doesn't have as much margin as the kid down the road. And that means we're going to say no to some things and we're going to choose one sport instead of five and,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
kind of things. But give yourself a breather.
Yeah. It's okay to take care of yourself. And I feel like some people need to hear that every now and then because, and if you grew up in a church setting or a Christian, sort of in Christian circles, some people caught the idea that taking care of yourself, resting, prioritizing your own, taking an hour in the afternoon to exercise or whatever, and you're not every now and then going, I'm not cooking tonight. Like, whatever it might be, like, it's okay. And when I say some people grew up in Christian circles, and it was almost like the sort of the idea, like, always be willing to serve, always be like, these are real, true, godly sort of fruits of the spirit, right? But it got almost misused, I guess, to almost be like, so you never refuel. And I just want to encourage people. It's interesting, isn't it, that Jesus says the most important thing is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then he says, and to love your neighbor as yourself, which is a really interesting kind of idea that he's saying, how can I love my neighbor if I'm not taking care of myself? If I'm not loving. And when I say loving, I don't mean pridefully. I mean taking care of. And do you prioritize your health? Do you prioritize? Jenny and I found that the best thing we can do for our kids is to make sure we're good. So that might mean we are saying no to them sometimes for each other, or the best way Jenny shows up for our family is to, hey, I'm going on a run. Y'all can figure out whatever you need to figure out right now, because she comes back refreshed and yada yada. So, anyways, that's okay. It's okay.
So we talk to God. You gotta ask God, and you gotta be flexible, and you gotta choose what wins. But the last thing, step 4, is be clear. And I think this is the surprising one. I think this is one people are gonna be like, I don't understand why that is a part of this. But the whole premise of this is to be clear on what those boundaries are and be honest about them. What I love about this particular part is sometimes people aren't clear with the boundaries that they need because they feel guilty, like Joanna was saying, that they don't deserve to have boundaries. So they haven't earned boundaries, or they're afraid of insecurity that there's going to be conflict or stuff, so they make other excuses. There's other reasons for these boundaries, or we can't get together because we're doing something else. They can't just say, "Hey, we're going to stay at home tonight," and they're not even clear with themselves. And I think what this does is it teaches them something that they should feel guilty about taking care of themselves. It makes them feel guilty, so they got to hide care. They have to hide personal boundaries, and I think what does being clear about what personal boundaries are in your life with your spouse, with others, and with the people that you're creating boundary with, what does that do? Being clear, what does that do to the psyche? What's that do to a person?
Well, there's two people to be clear with. One is yourself, because the clearer you are, the more you know when you've crossed it. Or you see what I'm saying? Like, if I don't know where the property line is, I don't know if I've crossed into someone, if I'm trespassing or not. if the clearer the property line is, the more I know, oh, I'm getting close to it or I've crossed it. I'm trespassing now. So some of it is just for your own sake. Um, if it's a family kind of boundary thing, obviously you got to be clear with your spouse or your partner or your kids because they are part of what's the word? Enforcing that boundary as well. So they need to all be on the same page related to it. Um, and every now and then you probably need to communicate it to someone who's you need to put some boundaries in place because they're not a they're draining. And I don't mean like just I mean like they take and never give. It's okay to set boundaries with those people. It's okay. And a lot of times those are family members, just to be honest. And we hide behind the like, well, I can't. It's my mom, or it's my sister, my brother, or whatever. Who cares? Like, it's okay. It's okay to say, you know what? These conversations, I can't have those with you because that's emotionally draining to me, and it's always unresolved. So there's nothing. It's not working towards healing. It's like not working towards health. It's just always critical and and I leave heavier, and that's not good for my family when I get home because then I'm all whatever they pick up on it. And so you know what? I'm going to choose them, and so we're just not gonna. I can't have that conversation with you. If we go there, I'm going to have to end it.
I
Those kinds of conversations, like about mom and dad. We're always talking about mom and dad and what they're doing, whatever. You can say, we're not going to, I can't have those. If the person breaks that, you just, you call that out. But sometimes you do need to be clear about that. Sometimes you don't. Like there's some people I won't respond to. They don't know that, but I know they are not healthy people. And then there have been times where it's like, hey, I need to tell you, or like my family. My family lives out of state. This is an easy example. So they'll be like, hey, we're thinking about coming in here. Sorry, bad timing for me and for us. That was just like, I need you to know that's not gonna happen. Like, so sometimes you do have to be just real clear with them.
And I think if you're an adult parent or if you're an older parent that has adult children, you need to respect the clarity. So
Well, yeah,
when you hear it, I think you need to honor the fact that they were brave enough to choose something valuable that wins. So Steph and I have already been preparing ourselves emotionally for the fact that someday our children will not be home on Christmas Day.
yeah,
And we're preparing ourselves emotionally
yes,
now
yeah,
that they will want to put their immediate family before
yes,
our family.
and
And
that should be celebrated.
yes,
Yeah,
instead of saying, well, there's 24 hours in this Christmas day,
yeah,
find a way.
yeah, yeah,
It's like, no.
yeah,
So I think clarity also needs to be celebrated when someone is brave enough to be clear about
yeah.
what those boundaries that God has uncovered for.
Yeah, I mean, that's hurtful though too, because sometimes, I mean, those are kind of the easiest ones, like schedule stuff. Imagine a friend or whatever says, "Hey, you, I can't go here because your negativity on these things is not beneficial to me. Um, having a heart that is loving right now," and so, or whatever it might be. Like it's not beneficial to me and meditating, or what does Paul say, to think about things that are excellent, true, worthy. Like, so I can't have those conversations with you. That does sting a little bit because it's like most people don't. This is what I meant earlier. Most people don't react real well when you set boundaries because they like you how you are. And if they can gripe to you and complain to you and talk about mom and dad and all that kind of stuff, and then you come to a point where it's like, I can't do that. That's not good for my spirit. They'll be like, well, you think you're better than me? Or whatever it might, I mean? Like there's all sorts of ways they'll try to shame you back into not having boundaries.
That's not of God. Like
No,
God,
that's why you're okay to cut them off.
and that's what Joanna said. Joanna said like that gives you that God's mandate. When you have God's mandate to set these boundaries, so maybe it's like you realize you've been giving money to your adult children, and it's like it's got to stop. And it's like God is leading you to say like it's got to stop. It's going to be uncomfortable when you say no, but here's the clear boundaries. Here's the expectations, and here's where we're going to go on. When you know that it's from God, there is an authority that you kind of rest in and lean against.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think again, one of the things we just talk about even at our church is just communicating truth with grace. And so I think just when you're being clear, like recognize, I don't know, I mean, I've even gotten to myself in these types of conversations and then you realize you've spoken so much grace that now you haven't been clear and you might even be back to where you started. And so recognizing going in like, hey, how can I say this in the most gracious way but while still sharing truth? And so then sometimes on the flip side, like I have been met with, or Kevin and I have even been met with, like, oh my goodness, we just didn't know that about you guys. Or we didn't know that this thing was hindering that thing. Or like, I don't know, I even sent some to someone last year, actually like in a season where usually from like November to mid January, we just know our life is crazy. So we're probably more in like hibernate mode than like trying to fill the schedule with all these other things. People just didn't know that. And so I think even um, when then you recognize boundaries, yeah, being clear about them, because again, like people have their own stuff that they're worrying about. And so they aren't necessarily even thinking about your boundaries first. And
Hmm.
so I think
Yeah.
just even being clear, yeah, sometimes people just don't know that about you. And then when you tell them, they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that totally makes sense. And so then I've been carrying around like, oh, I'm so nervous to tell them that, we can't go out to dinner this week because that's not in the budget. And so then when you
Mm.
just say to them, hey, one of our values is this, it's not in the budget this week. They're like, oh yeah, okay, cool, no problem. So anyway, sometimes I think it's just, yeah, that's like a communication gap. I think sometimes
And I
we can
don't
help
think you would
fill.
say that we have to explain the why behind. You need to know it. You and
Right.
Kevin need to know it.
Yep.
There's sometimes you just go, "Yep, can't do it.
Totally.
Maybe 2 months from now."
Totally.
And you
And
know,
I think that depends too on like, I mean, I know we've talked about a lot, like just where, in what circles are the people that you're setting boundaries with too.
mhm.
And so I don't know. For us, we've just found that sometimes the people in the closest circles, if we're comfortable, sometimes it is helpful to just give more context.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
And also just trusting that one, if God is in this, he's going to help you. So let's not assume God's like, go ahead, I'm going to be sitting back here. Tell me when you're done. Like God's going to give you wisdom and the Holy Spirit's going to go with you. And I think it's also believing the best in other people. And believing the best that, sometimes conversations will hurt, but even some of the most difficult of people can be better. And sometimes it's just an honest, truthful conversation of, this is what it feels like on the other side of you. Like, I don't want to talk politics with you at Thanksgiving
Right.
because it's like,
That
something,
may be a very good boundary people need to put in place.
and you know what I mean? I don't want to talk politics with you because I go home and I don't
Mhm.
think of the good times we had. I think I'm frustrated. And so I don't want to talk about that. It's patronizing to assume that they can't handle that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So,
And some people probably can't, but that's okay.
yeah. And that is okay.
Yeah.
So, let's paint a picture. Last thing. What could it look like? What's the hope for someone that has heard this? They know the four steps that they can take. What's your hope and prayer for people listening that they could exercise these new boundaries in their life?
Go ahead, Jordan.
I was going to say, I hope people just find a little bit more freedom than what they have today. Like, cause I think, like you said in the beginning, like there is so much freedom that can be found in boundaries. And what's funny is I think even like from my own experience, once you've like tasted that, it
Mhm.
like makes it a lot easier to want more of it. And so like wanting more margin or wanting more freedom in that margin, yeah, is like a really freeing thing. And I think allows God to just work in ways that like I couldn't have even imagined. Um, so yeah, I think that would be a really cool thing.
I love that word freedom. The word that came to mind was peace for me, and I think peace is found in the margins, and I think margins are created by boundaries. And so, um, we see time and time again, this is something God speaks to, whether it's creating Sabbath rest at the creation, whether it's Proverbs 4, I think 23, where it says, guard your heart. That's a boundary statement. Guard your heart, put boundaries around it. Some of that's because of temptation. Some of that, though, is the emotional toll that people have and the schedule toll. Like you cannot live beyond your limits. Jesus brought it up in Matthew 6. Um, about figuring out what's got you so worked up and striving and not being content and chasing things that not gets rid of all the margin. And he says, don't you trust God? Like, he's going to take care of you if you set the boundaries. So, I mean, I just look at it and go, man, this is for our best. God has built this into um, the way that the world works, the way that we work. And so my hope would be that it's not, don't let it be, you don't know your kids at 18 to finally wake you up to, man, I wish I would have created some boundaries. Don't let it be a heart attack. Don't let it be, a bitter relationship because you never drew emotional boundaries. You just kept carrying someone's burdens and you never considered, you just enabled them. So, I mean, like,
I love that.
doesn't have to be that way.
And for me, I can't help but think of the trees and the canopy clearing out and that light and growth. Like, you have no idea what God wants to do if you just clear a little bit of time, a bit of space, let a little light in. What could grow in your family, grow in your life, what could grow in your work, grow in your heart. So no matter where you're at, no matter where you need boundaries, like, remember that you deserve boundaries. You deserve rest. You don't have to earn rest. You deserve it. And God's willing to walk you through these steps. He's walking you through these steps so that you can find peace and rhythm in life. This is one of the blessings of being a life changed by Christ. And if you are a life changed by Christ, live that change out.